Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was sent to the world of the gods. Naruto has emerged victorious in the Fourth Shinobi War, but not without its sacrifices. Suddenly, he is pulled from his world, meets a god, and is left with a mission with a due date he knows nothing about, in a world he doesn't understand, with only a desperate hope to return home. Can he manage it? Can he succeed in a world of meddling gods, with only the Bijuu as his allies? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 6, Twins. The next day, before the sun rose, a startled cry was heard from Artemis's tent. As the hunters burst in, they realized Artemis was being held down on the floor by her arms, Naruto's weights preventing her from standing up. She tried, but the weight kept her down. She growled in annoyance and exercised some divine power to stand up straight, and undo the fastenings. Which she really shouldn't have done inside her tent. They collided with the floor in a loud bang, ripping a hole in the bottom of her tent and breaking her toe in the process. She gave out a startled yelp and hopped around on one foot for a bit, before a large flash caught everyone's attention. Standing behind them all, was Naruto, with a camera and the largest grin she had ever seen. The hunters connected the dots pretty fast, and after a few stunned moments, Artemis gave out a battle cry. "Seize him!" Naruto laughed wildly as he led the hunters, in their sleeping wear, all around camp while dodging arrows and laughing the whole way. They eventually caught him and got him to delete the picture, even trying to beat him up, but they broke their own fingers trying, and Naruto ended up having to heal them as penance. All in all, it was a good morning. Especially for Zoe, she got a copy of the picture. She and Naruto grinned at each other, before Zoe nodded, "Our agreement is henceforth fulfilled." Naruto gave a mock salute, "Pleasure doing business with you. Glad to be a part of it." And then he turned to see Artemis, glaring at him. "So you were the mastermind, eh?" Naruto laughed and two-finger prodded her in the forehead, earning him multiple cries of dismay, "Catch me if you can." And so, he then played a dangerous game of catch the Naruto, including arrows, knives, and anything else they could get their hands on, each other included. An hour later, with Naruto and his pursuers sweating, he laughed and waved. "Sorry ladies, maybe next time. Train hard." And then he jogged away, laughing to himself as the hunters promised vengeance. When he left, they all stared at Artemis. "My lady, why is he so different? Boys are so, but him, I thought he hated us, you in particular, was he lying? Is he tricking us?" Artemis shook her head. "No, we reached a accord in our spar. It's much easier to understand someone's intent in a battle, there is no room for lies, only truth can be expressed, but yes, he is different. Speaking of which, I have something to tell you girls. I am going on a solo hunt. Naruto wandered a distance away, coming to the cliffside and diving in. He sank into the water, his happy mask fading beneath the ripples, and exercised some water manipulation to wash himself and his clothes clean. It was a brilliant idea, using the water's natural force and pull to clean his hair and clothing. All he had to do was make it move chaotically with more speed, and in a few minutes, he was clean. His clothes were drying on the cliffside, and he was holding his breath at the bottom, staring at the water's rippling surface. "You know Gaki, those Olympians, they aren't like Kaguya." Son Goku said. Naruto snorted, blowing a small air ring. "Yeah? What's different?" "She was more human. Sure, she was an ass in the beginning, but her blade held no lies. She is looking out for the girl's best interests. And not caring what damage she leaves behind. Gaki. Listen to me, damn it. Look, all I'm saying is that you're letting your pre-existing biases cloud your judgment. Keep this up and you be just as bad as those damned villagers." Naruto choked on water when he heard that, and when he was about to reply, Kikuo spoke up. "You are being unreasonable, something I will not allow in my Jinchuriki. She is a goddess, yes, but she isn't yours, she is an Olympian, They are different. Yes, they may be power-hungry, snobbish, and flawed, but that is what makes them more human. Kaguya chose to be a monster, she sought to make everyone else powerless. Don't paint them with the same brush. Naruto sighed, cleansing his thought process and letting his mind fall blank as he relaxed. It wasn't that he made a habit of reclining nude at the bottom of a river, but something about it was enjoyable. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded in understanding, before giving a mental thumbs up and focusing on what to do now. It was obvious that she and he would probably never see each other again, so should he cash in on the favor now? They would probably never be friends, so what should he ask for? Immortality was unappealing, he had no desire to be one of the divine pricks. Naruto, about that. Jiyuki said guiltily. Naruto frowned as he listened to all the other Bijuu try and shut him up almost all at once, and he grew concerned. What is it? Is there something wrong? Want to change posts, are you bored? Jiyuki grimaced and shook his head. No, it concerns the consequences of holding all 9 of us without the Rinnegan. Naruto blinked. Okay, so I don't have the Rinnegan, what's wrong? Well, what's unique about Rinnegan wielders is that their chakra has all 5 natures, making it much easier to contain us. You were okay with Kurama because of your Uzumaki traits and shared wind affinity, it's why you survived as a baby, but with all of us, it's destroying you. All the Bijuu fell silent as they waited for Naruto's reaction. What's going to happen to you guys? Are you going to be okay? Naruto nearly screamed in his mind, sitting up straight in the water and being knocked around by the current. The Bijuu were startled and even touched at his concern, but felt it was not in the right place. You idiot. The strain will kill you. Naruto kicked out of the water, landing on its surface and walking quickly to the shore, where his clothes were still wet, but it would have to do. Well? Nothing I can do about it, right? How much time do you guys have? The Bijuu were actually starting to get annoyed Naruto. You will die. Naruto sighed, I was always meant to die. Twitch. The Bijuu were agape at that statement. I wasn't supposed to live very long, that's the fate of all Jinchuriki, slaves to the village until the power inside them burns them from the inside out. I knew I was going to die, and I knew that having all of you inside me would hasten the process. Naruto. Naruto grinned at the sky, looking up as he put on his shirt. But it's worth it. I know how much you guys have suffered at the hands of other shinobi, I figured while I can't buy you much time, I could give you a chance to be free of that pain for a while. I don't regret a thing. The Bijuu were silent for a long time after that, before all of them cut their links with him to talk amongst themselves. Naruto sighed at being kept out of the loop, and just hoped they didn't do anything stupid. Like leaving his body in this new world. Naruto finished getting dressed and channeled some wind chakra around his body to whip around his form and dried him fairly quickly. Naruto smiled at their concern for him, but he would always believe that their lives came before his, that was how this would work, now and always. Naruto did some basic stretches and started climbing up the cliff, walking slowly as he thought. He knew that he was eventually going to burn out. Having multiple chakra monsters inside you would do that to anyone. The only reason he was alive right now was the seal his father gave him as a child, helping him deal with the load and holding it back. However, having several chakra natures inside him that constantly flowed through him was eroding his coils and pathways. Pretty soon, he wouldn't be able to use chakra, and most likely die as it was essentially his life force. Naruto sighed as he reached the top and climbed over, glancing around to see if he missed anything. The hunters had packed up camp, and all of them were huddled in a group away from the other demigods, specifically males. He saw Nico standing next to Percy, staring at Bianca with a look of confusion at her silver clothes. Naruto sighed as he jumped high into the air, arching over the distance between them and landed with a quiet thud with a small cloud of dust. The hunters immediately drew their weapons, but seeing him they slowly put them away. Naruto raised an eyebrow and nodded appreciatively, before turning and walking to Nico, who ran forward and showered Naruto with greetings. Naruto only chuckled at his enthusiasm and walked Nico back over to the small group, who were looking thankful that he wasn't shot full of arrows. Naruto only smiled at them, before standing between them and the hunters to ensure that any arrows flung at them, he would intercept first. The hunters noticed his posture and a few looked a little annoyed while others respected his defense as a sign he took them seriously. Artemis walked forward from the trees and towards her hunters, before speaking a few words and all of them bowing their heads in acknowledgement. Then she turned to Naruto, looking incredibly reluctant, and waved him over. Naruto frowned, before a smile crossed his face and he shook his head. Then waved her over to him. Artemis looked like she had seen a ghost as the rest of the hunters weren't sure to glare at the boy, or laugh at their lady's expression. She waved him over with increased annoyance, and Naruto responded with an even larger smile, and a mimic of her movements. She looked ready to pop a gasket as she turned red, but then her features relaxed, and she started walking forward. She took one step, and then waved him over again, like she was dealing with a child. Naruto only grinned with faintly shaking shoulders, before taking one step and waving her over to him. She just sighed and resolved herself, before walking forward, and Naruto mimicking her movements. Eventually, they met in the center, Naruto staring at the goddess with amusement. "Hey. Glad to see you healed up this morning." She grew a tick mark, but shook it off. Us immortals heal very quickly from almost any injury, even fatal blows. Naruto looked confused for a moment. "I thought immortals couldn't be fatally wounded as you can't actually die. Is immortality different here?" She looked at him like he was an idiot, before realization flashed. "Oh, I suppose you're right, it's not a fatal injury if you survive it, is it?" Naruto grinned. "Well, that aside, I believe we have things to discuss." She nodded, glad he caught on. "Yes, the hunters are tagging along back to your camp. I would like to ask that, as you bear no attachment to any other Olympians, you help them stay out of trouble." There was a unanimous cry of dismay from her hunters, but she silenced them with a look that Naruto couldn't see. Naruto laughed. "What? Surely they have been there before. What's the problem? Wait, let me guess. The last time they were there, they ended up, damaging any males that bothered them. You want me to run interference? What about Thalia? Or Chiron? Thalia carries weight in the camp as a daughter of Zeus, and she is a girl. Chiron is the leader of the camp. Can't he just tell everyone to stay clear of them? Why me?" Artemis sighed in annoyance. There is animosity between the hunters and the campers, so while they would be the best choice, their personal feelings might lead to conflict. Naruto frowned. "You really don't trust men at all, do you?" Artemis looked at him like he was an idiot. "Yes, they lie, steal, kill, abuse and torture, manipulate, and are driven by their sexual needs. They cannot be trusted with a group of maidens." Naruto looked at her like she was an idiot. "Did you miss the fact that I am a boy?" She shook her head. "I am fully aware. I have heard only good things from the nature spirits. They say that on your first encounter with them, you apologized for Pan's pervy attitude, you called it, and promised that you will never become that to the best of your ability. That is a serious oath. Have you forsworn love?" She didn't get the reaction she was expecting. Naruto's bright eyes clouded over with a brief flash of pain and anguish, something that caught her by surprise, but it vanished. "So, you need me to watch the hunters? As a favor? Our maiden goddess trusting a boy to protect them?" Artemis looked angered by his question. "I wouldn't trust a boy, I am trusting you. Your aura, your soul, it's one of the purest I have ever seen." Naruto blinked at her in surprise, and she stepped back, realizing how close she had gotten, and blushed slightly before returning to her cold demeanor. Naruto took a moment before shifting stances, and the air around him changed. It became dangerous, high-strung, and volatile. Like a monster. Naruto looked down at her. "Do you know what you're asking? I will give you the same warning I gave Chiron a while back. My help is different from most. When you ask me to do something, I do it completely. If I am attacked, and I deem them an enemy, they will die, quickly. If you give me this mission, anyone who gets in my way will be killed, injured, or forced to run. Are you prepared to take responsibility?" She looked at the male standing before her. This didn't make sense. Where did the cheerful boy of Sun go? What happened? His eyes, they were so cold, where did that warmth go? He has suffered, incredibly, Artemis realized. That pain that flashed in his eyes earlier. He had been heartbroken, his body smashed to pieces. Maybe that is why his soul shone so bright. It was made of thousands of fractures. It was like it was carefully crafted back together into the original, but stronger than before, colder, more focused and guarded. She thought back to his words, and felt a genuine smile cross her features. Protect the hunt. Naruto stared at her for a few more moments, before his happy disposition returned, making her wonder just how much he was truly damaged to be able to change like that. Alright then, by the way, this means you owe me 2 favors now. Blink. Huh. Naruto smiled cheekily at her. What, you expect me to do this for free? I only protect things that need protection for free, but your girls are vastly more than capable to defend themselves against Camp Half-Blood. I am severe overkill. She glared at him for a moment, trying to make him bend, but he kept that stupid grin on his face, and just staring at it ate away her resolve to fight. Her anger dissipated as the tension left her shoulders. Very well, as compensation, you will receive 1 favor from the hunt. Don't make us kill you afterwards. She said threateningly, trying to regain control of the conversation. She racked her brain for reasons why her guard kept falling around him, but couldn't, so she resolved herself to keep it up at all times. Boys weren't to be trusted. Naruto watched her have her little internal war, and felt voices in his head snorting. You've always had this strange ability to make people trust you. If you weren't such a kind person, I could see you being a mainstream villain. Oh, you're back, how is your little private chat? Ignored. Naruto wasn't sure whether to smirk or get annoyed, so he settled for the default response. So, when are we heading out? She glared at him a bit more, before turning to the horizon. Any minute now. The hunters noticed where their goddess was staring, and all of them visibly paled. Naruto frowned, before turning to the goddess, who looked to be hating herself. Moon for brains, did you just make more trouble for me? She glared at Naruto before frowning. She resisted the urge to beat him up as she still needed him, and sighed. It's not that he is trouble, it's that he loves trouble itself. He is so annoying. She muttered, and Naruto lifted an eyebrow, before hearing a strange, humming or whirring noise. He looked up and saw the sun rising over the mountains, and getting closer. Naruto frowned before entering battle stance. Son Goku, Madatabi, fire incoming. I'm here, kitten. Bring them on. Naruto felt a small smile tug at the corners of his lips, before preparing himself. The sun kept getting closer and closer, and the heat grew to the point where Percy had to summon a water shield from his group's water bottles, and the hunters had to hide behind trees. Naruto felt Madatabi's and Son Goku's warmth spread through him, and he knew he would survive this just fine. The earth began to steam, and the snow that had previously covered the earth in a thin veil melted away, leaving the ground's natural coldness to seep into everyone's socks. The sun pulled up right in front of them all, and then the light slowly faded. In its place, was a Maserati spider. Naruto could see Percy staring at it in shock and salivating slightly with desire in his eyes. Weird. Naruto focused back on the car. It was a red convertible, radiating so much heat it glowed. If he was honest, he knew that he didn't understand a thing about how automobiles worked, but decided that wasn't necessary. They were polluters and ran on natural resources. He was pretty sure he was faster than they were anyway. He watched as the driver hopped out of the 2-seater vehicle with a megawatt smile, teeth so white it made him wonder if the sun was his dentist. He looked about 17 or 18, with sandy blonde hair and some outdoorsy charm. He was dressed in jeans, loafers, and sleeveless t-shirt. Wow, Apollo is hot, Thalia muttered. Percy looked at her strangely for a moment, but then snapped his fingers in understanding. Oh, I get it, he is the sun god. He said with a smile, and Thalia only glared at him. That's not what I meant. Naruto chuckled at their little scuffle. Artemis scowled, but Apollo seemed to catch wind of it as well by his smirk, although he pretended he didn't. Little sister. Apollo waved dramatically as he rushed forward like a knight in shining armor. You don't call, you don't write, how am I supposed to know my darling little sister is okay? Naruto stared at Apollo for a small amount of time, before turning to Artemis. I thought Dionysus was the god of theater, am I confused? Silence. Artemis stared at him wide-eyed for a moment, before swiftly turning away from him as her shoulders shook up and down. Apollo stared at her agape for a moment, before turning to Naruto in awe. "You just made Lil Sis laugh. How? Tell me your ways." Artemis rounded on him in an instant, slamming her foot into his chest and sending him flying back into his Maserati. "I'm not laughing. And I am not your little sister. We are twins." "Yeah, but I was born first," Apollo said proudly with his thumb jutted out pointing at his chest. Artemis growled even more and glared at him. "We are twins. How many millennia do we have to have the same stupid argue?" She seethed. "So what's up?" He cut her off. "I see you got the girls with you, you guys need some tips on archery." Artemis growled and looked ready to pummel him again, but Naruto only chuckled. They both turned to him in explanation and he laughed dryly. "Their aim is already frighteningly accurate. If their accuracy got any truer, mankind would be in dire straits." Apollo laughed loudly while Artemis stared at him, thankful for the praise, but annoyed that he prevented her from beating on her idiot brother. Apollo looked up at Naruto with small praise. "You're alright kid, who are ya?" Naruto grinned, "As of right now, temporary guardian of the hunt." Silence. Artemis stared at him in horror while Apollo stared at him with his jaw so low it was shoveling melted snow. What? Did you just say dash? Boy. Don't carelessly throw that title around, you are not the guardian of the hunt. Naruto frowned at her. "Is that not what you just asked me to do?" Artemis glared at him in embarrassment. "No. I asked you to watch out for them." Naruto tilted his head to the side. "Is that not what a guardian does?" Artemis shook with embarrassment and anger, her face red with annoyance, and Apollo only watched in awe at the emotions his sister was displaying. Who the hell was this kid? "Gaki, what's your name?" Apollo asked in partial reverence. Naruto twitched at the nickname, and pain and anger flashed through his eyes briefly, before his cold exterior resurfaced. "Name is Naruto, not Gaki, do not call me that again." Apollo shivered at the aura, and Artemis looked almost glad that this side of him was back. "What the hell is going on here?" Naruto looked at the sun god coldly. "So, Apollo, I assume you are here to take the hunters and campers to Camp Half-Blood." Apollo nodded. "Yes, that is my reason for being here, but wait. I feel a haiku coming on," he said loudly, before striking a ridiculous pose and closing his eyes in concentration. The unanimous groan from the hunter and Artemis was all Naruto needed to know. He reached forward and flicked Apollo right in the forehead, shocking the god out of his pose and concentration, stumbling back with a small welt. First Gaki, and now haiku, was this guy trying to piss him off? "Just get going, we are wasting daylight, you have a schedule to keep, do you not?" Naruto said firmly, before stepping back and giving the god room. Apollo was still looking shocked at him. You didn't get burned." Naruto looked at his fingers, seeing they were steaming a bit, but they were completely undamaged. "Thanks guys. We got you." Son Goku grinned and said with a courageous tone. Naruto smirked internally, but he kept an impassive look on the outside. "No, why?" Apollo approached him cautiously, before reaching forward and touching Naruto on the shoulder. His clothes immediately burned away under his touch, but his skin remained undamaged. Naruto looked at his now torn shirt and grimaced in annoyance. "Dude. I liked this suit," he said in complaint, before leveling a glare. "I don't like you either." Apollo just looked unshocked, same as Artemis. Even the hunt seemed surprised. Naruto noticed all their looks, and realized he probably did something not normally seen. He grimaced at that, not knowing what was going on, and turned to glare at Apollo. "People are going to wonder what the sun is doing so long on the horizon for, better hurry." Apollo snapped out of his awe and turned to his ride. He clapped his hands, and there was another flash of light, before the car disappeared, and in its place, was a large bus. Naruto thought it was a bus, but it looked so modified, he wasn't sure if it could be considered one. Naruto turned to the hunt and rocked his head at the bus. They glared at him in response, but they got on as they had to anyway. As they walked by, Naruto watched and took note of each of their glaring faces, unflinching at their looks of disgust and hatred. It became apparent that while he had fun with them this morning, It no longer mattered, as he was a boy. Just as they last of them got on, cramming into the back to avoid them all, the demigods got in afterwards. Annabeth looked at him in genuine surprise as she passed him. He made a mental note to interrogate her on what just happened, and looked to Artemis. I will ensure their safety. So don't worry. Naruto said calmly, though I really don't think they need it, it's the will of a goddess, isn't it? Naruto said cheekily, his old warmth returning. Artemis was both impressed and confused by the male in front of her. He was so different. Hopefully, his treatment of the hunters will shed more light on his character. You should be honored, you are the first male I have ever given a quest to. She said with neutrality, but she wanted to see if he would get a big head, gloat, or even swell with pride, something a boy would do. Naruto only shrugged, before waving her off with a shooing motion, like a pesky dog. I'll thank you when the mission's over, now shoo. You got a hunt to start, right? She stared at him in disbelief. He was shooing her off. The nerve. She got ready to retort, but Naruto was already walking away, closing the bus doors. While he was outside. "Gee, Naruto. What are you doing?" Apollo asked. Naruto just grunted, "Get going, I'm right behind you." Apollo looked confused but nodded. Naruto walked back to Nico's window and smiled at him radiantly. "Hey Nico, I'll race you there." Nico looked at him in confusion, before grinning like a madman and running to the front, telling Apollo to hurry up. Apollo started his bus up, and the heat started to rise. Naruto's clothes started hissing, but he ignored them. He had more clothes at camp, and his weird cloak kept appearing after it was destroyed. It was cool, but also annoying. I mean, it was funny once, but after the next 3 it got annoying. Who showers with their clothes on? Naruto took a few steps back, before turning back to Artemis. You better hurry, they might kill me before you get back. He said with a smile, before turning and running straight by the bus, and then into the air. You could hear Nico's cheers of glee and his pestering of Apollo as they took off and followed him. Naruto grinned at them, and then ran alongside. Hey Sun God! Race you! One favor to the winner. Naruto said with a massive grin, earning him a chuckle from the challenged god. Bring it! Apollo shouted with humor, before flooring it and shooting ahead. Naruto laughed and speed up with him, keeping pace, before slowly pulling ahead, his legs moving in a blur as he raced on the air. The hunters looked at him in disbelief as he kept pace with the sun. Naruto laughed at their expressions and started running around them in a spiral, swooping under and appearing on the other side, before running over the top of them and coming back. He loved running on air, it made him feel untouchable. Although he was tiring pretty quick, it was way too fun to quit now. He saw Apollo's impressed looks, and nodded. I can't go full speed, it'll kill anyone in here with me when the heat rises. He said sadly, and Naruto grinned, looks like I win. Apollo just shook his head, sure. Naruto grinned, before running to the door and jumping on, opening it and stepping in quickly, before closing it just as fast. When he made contact with the floor, he felt fatigue hit him, and laughed tiredly, before sinking to the floor. He was immediately jumped by Nico, who was laughing like crazy. You're so cool. He said excitedly, you're like Zeus. Total superhero. Naruto snorted, and Apollo looked at him in realization, oh, you're one of Zeus's brats eh? Naruto shook his head tiredly. I don't know what it is, but everyone has such a hard time believing that I am completely mortal. Apollo nearly had a heart attack as he looked at Naruto incredulously. What? No. Naruto grimaced, see? Nobody believes me. Nico giggled and pulled on Naruto's cloak, pulling him up and walking him back. Naruto took a seat a few spaces back, sitting in between the campers and the hunters. Even now, he had a mission. Naruto sighed and leaned back in his chair, Nico sitting next to him and pelting him with questions. Naruto only smiled and roughhoused with him a bit, before falling back and resting his eyes. Gimme a minute, I gotta recharge. Girls, if you're gonna kill me, do it now, cause once we get there, I'm gonna be shadowing you everywhere, and if you think you can hide. Naruto turned to them with a feral grin, a gleam in his eye. No, I have never failed a mission since I came here, and I don't intend to start now. The girls stared at him for a moment, before scoffing, "If we truly wanted to evade you, you would stand no chance." Naruto's grin only grew wider, and then he turned back, smiling with his eyes closed. "Then try your best. I swore to Artemis I would ensure the safety of each of you until she returned. Just try and ditch me, it'll be more fun than simply watching you from the shadows." They looked a little nervous at that, but a few of them grinned. That sounded like a challenge to them. A few had seen the massive power he could wield and found it an excellent prey to hunt. If he wanted to play, then like all the other boys, he will be put down. "Hey Thalia, want to drive? You're a daughter of Zeus, right? You're in your domain. You can't let this opportunity pass you by." Oh shit. Chapter 7, Conversation. It's times like these that he was happy he received basic shinobi training. Thalia, as it was apparently unknown, was deathly afraid of heights. Yeah, a daughter of Zeus, it caught everyone by surprise too. So, while she was crushing the steering wheel under her death grip of fear, Naruto was standing on the ceiling. He darted about quickly, catching and returning the hunters to the back while keeping the other demigods on the other side of him. If the two impacted, he had a sinking feeling the boys would lose their evolutionary purpose and the women, well, he didn't know, but he felt the mystery was better than the answer. Of course, the campers were grateful and also surprised at his ability to remain attached to the flat surface despite being upside down more than 75% of the time, but Thalia's driving definitely warranted it. Since taking up his post, he had caught and prevented 14 major injuries, and a few lives from being lost. On the steep inclines, he had to jump out of a window more than once to save a hunter who wasn't prepared. Of course they glared at him maliciously, but he had a mission, and a shinobi never lets their emotions cripple their judgment, though he did wonder how deep their hatred ran. Did they think they would survive the fall, or was dying preferable to being saved by a man? So here he was, catching Nico for the 20th time, and trying his best to give warnings to steep inclines and stalls, which weren't really helpful, but they helped them ride the waves. Jackson handled it pretty well, so it only solidified Naruto's opinion. But eventually, all things come to an end. Naruto was seriously starting to wonder if he should just anchor everyone to their seats with an earth jutsu, or maybe knock them out and stuff them under the seats. He walked forward hurriedly, before touching Thalia on the shoulder to reassure her. And then Thalia hit him with a bolt of lightning. Now, Naruto knew it wasn't really intentional, but he didn't really appreciate it, especially since none of the Bijuu had resistance to electricity. It was why Kumo had two of them in the first place. But his patience had run out. Naruto stormed forward, before walking to the driver's seat and waving her attention. She looked at him with wild eyes. He resisted the need to flinch and smiled at her kindly. "Hey Thalia, it's okay, give me a moment and you will be fine, I'll take over." Before Apollo could say anything, Naruto opened the door of the sun and hopped out, falling briefly, before running up and catching them swiftly. He disappeared for a moment, and then the waves stopped. Thalia was still pale as paper, but when she tugged the controls, she noticed they weren't responding, and that they were headed on a straight course without any bumps. She wasn't sure if she should be happy or not at that. Apollo also seemed confused. The sun can't break, so what was happening? No way. The sun god walked to the center of the bus, before opening the floor panel for an emergency escape, and lo and behold, he saw Naruto carrying the sun. Of course, it took him a minute to process this, but Naruto didn't even sigh at him, his breaths coming short with exertion. Taking to camp, just get Thals to chill. And so, Apollo spent the rest of the ride trying to console the daughter of Zeus, who was apparently unable to let go of the wheel. Percy and Annabeth went up with Apollo, though Percy hung back. He was there to provide backup support should either of them be blasted back like Naruto was, which didn't look like it felt good. Grover, on the other hand, took advantage of the opportunity. He made a mental plea and vowed to immediately apologize to her and pray for forgiveness, before he got up and walked to the back of the bus. He couldn't help it. The hunters were right there. He was a healthy young satyr. Grover approached them with stars in his eyes, and a small amount of drool pooling out of his mouth. A hunter stepped forward, before the hunters had their minds blown. They didn't know her. The girl smirked at their expressions, before a plume of smoke covered her from view, and in her place was Naruto, a dangerous look in his eyes. Grover, I do believe the boss told you to keep your pants on and tight, and keep your furry ass far from the girls. Have you forgotten already? The girls were flabbergasted at this. Naruto? How the hell was he here if he was holding up the sun? Was he a god? It would make sense, only divine beings can be in two places at once, but he was mortal. Grover, on the other hand, was thinking the same thought over and over again. I am dead, I am dead, I am dead, I am dead, I am dead. Yes, you are. Naruto said, as if reading his thoughts, and Grover fainted. Well, that was fast. Naruto said dryly, before turning to the girls, sorry boss couldn't do that in person, but he is currently running through the air with the sun in his hands. The girls stared at him in horror. You were a girl? Naruto frowned. Well, I guess it would be better to explain it to you rather than let you think in the dark. Please listen carefully, and I'd like to ask you don't share this information with anyone, or, well, I'll have to kill you and everyone you tell, no exceptions. The girls flinched at that, before glaring at him defiantly, to which he smiled in response. Good, now, let me start. He clapped his hands together, and he was enveloped in a small cloud of smoke, before the girl from before was standing before them again. The girls were honestly surprised at this technique. One of the braver ones even reached up and grabbed her, giving her rather well-endowed breast a good squeeze. Naruto flinched at the contact, and a small blush made its way onto her features. And you call men perverts, she said in a feminine voice. They only looked at him in shock. It's real. Naruto sighed, which he realized he was doing a lot lately. Well, yes, and no. Yes, they are there, but no, they aren't real. They looked confused at that, and the imposter huntress rubbed her nose cutely. Well, first off, I am not actually boss, or Naruto, I am a clone created from his life force. I guess you could call me a temporary split personality. I am him, but he is not me. Boss has the ability to augment his life force to accomplish incredible abilities, and as such, here I am, and that is why I can appear like this. By augmenting the power he used to create me, I can change form. The girls stared at him in awe, and then horror. I bet you used this for lecherous intent. Naruto immediately turned to the girl with a powerful stare. No, would you like to know why? They glared at him, disbelief evident, but said nothing. Naruto sighed, because I know, partially, of how you feel. They looked completely insulted, and Naruto held up a feminine hand. I wanted to experience it. I wanted to understand both sides of the story, so, Boss transformed himself into a woman, for a month, and lived as one in that time, and he was horrified with what he found. Perverts, rapists, thieves, molesters, playboys, pedophiles, men in general didn't seem to take him as an equal. If it wasn't for his training and abilities, he would have been looked down upon the entire month he gave himself. The stares, the expectations, the standards, it was like he had this massive social test he took every day. He was horrified that it was like this for everyday life, and so, he created 10,000 clones, like me, and sent them out across the world, transforming into foreign beauties to see if there was a safe place, anywhere. Naruto's aura darkened as he returned to his natural form in a puff of smoke, and looked at them sadly, and they were very few and far between. The hunters weren't really sure how to handle this. It genuinely sounded like he understood, and felt seriously sorry for them. I can't imagine what it must have been like to live your whole life like that, trapped in such a way. Boss tried all types of forms. Big, small, fat, skinny, natural, plastic, kind, and mean, rich and poor, dirty, and clean. If he was beautiful, he was hounded. If he wasn't, he was ignored. If he was perfect, he was assaulted by some drunkard, and if he was the opposite, he was disregarded and socially tortured. Nothing he tried seemed to dissuade his gender. He wanted to have this talk with you when he got to camp, but no point now. How will he know we had this conversation? The clone grinned and pointed at himself. I am made of his life force, my memories return to him as I am an aspect of him. When I die, he gets all my memories. The girls looked slightly horrified at this. You die. Naruto nodded. It's not really death, it's more like I am becoming whole again. It's nice to be out and about, but after a while, I miss being the real me, if you get what I am saying. So you aren't really him. Naruto frowned. Well, strictly speaking, no, but at the same time I am. It's confusing, but basically, he is a puzzle, and I am a piece. I am part of him, but he isn't entirely me, I only make up a section. The girls looked surprised at the technique, it was truly useful. He could send an aspect of himself anywhere, respond as he would without controlling it as it is essentially him, and gather any and all information in its life before moving on. They were physical too. Wait. Does that mean you created the images of 10,000 beautiful females in your head? Naruto frowned. Well no, some were not the societal ideal, so probably only 700 or so. I got a few from, what are they called? They're like comic books but have more realistic pictures. The girls looked surprised at this, Zoe listing off some examples she knew. Calendars? Photos? Magazines? Naruto snapped his finger. Yes. Magazines. I used those as references to create them. My history with women is, well, limited, and I honestly don't want to delve into it again. It's part of the reason I wanted to understand them. I didn't understand why they acted the way they did. What a wake-up call that was. Naruto muttered, and the hunters looked at each other for a few moments, a silent discussion ensuing. Naruto looked at them before hearing the demigods coming back. Sorry for this. But I am going to have to hide amongst you again. I'd hate to have my secrets spilled so soon. You can try to beat me up later. Naruto then transformed back into a girl, though this time with a smaller chest so she could squeeze in, and smiled at them all, before whispering. It's just till the end of the ride, after that, I'm gone. If you want to talk to boss, he will get all my memories when I dispel, so don't worry. Thanks. The hunters shifted away from him, and he gave an expression of mock hurt, while some were in deep thought. Maybe that was why he got along so well with Artemis, because he truly understood? Because he actually experienced it, and realized why they swore their oaths. Maybe he wasn't so bad? They all looked at each other in question, and then decided unanimously. But he is still a male, and they cannot be trusted. Wait to reaffirm his story, before even thinking of considering him an ally, much less trusting him. The rest of the ride went by pretty quick. The Naruto clone had her eyes closed, a faint smile, and the hunters stared at her the whole way. They arrived at Camp Half-Blood, and there was a loud banging on the floor. Apollo opened the space, and saw Naruto sweating enough to classify as a rainstorm. Apollo, I won't be able to set this down gently. If you want to take over, you can. Apollo looked at him, before smiling innocently, and sweating nervously. About that, Thalia can't let go of the wheel. Naruto paled. What? I'm gonna die here. Apollo looked at him nervously, before giving him a thumbs up. I believe in you. And then shutting the floor escape in his face. Apollo stood up, and you could see it on his face. He was debating jumping ship before the landing, but remembered the hunters were here, and Artemis would likely kill him if he abandoned them. He grinned. Damsels in distress, this is my moment. He walked forward with a purpose, a giant smile his face, no doubt preparing a courageous speech to Thalia to assure her that he was the man for the job, and some other bogus stereotype. But he really should have learned from Naruto's example. Thalia released another shock, and it sent Apollo rocketing back. Naruto's clone jumped in the way, taking the hit while running interference, but he had quite the momentum behind him, and while it did slow him down, it didn't stop him. The clone looked at them nervously as it fell to the floor. Sorry, that cost the rest of my energy, good luck. Pop. And so, the clones vanished in a puff of smoke. They all turned Apollo, seeing him touching 3 maidens to catch himself. Glares. Nervous laugh. And then screams of terror. Chapter 8, Challenge. Naruto received the memories of the clone, and wasn't sure how to feel. On the one side, he was happy that the hunters had listened to his speech, and not killed him, but at the same time, they were probably torturing the sun god that was currently needed to save him. Desperate times, desperate measures. Shukaku. Sand armor needs some mega reinforcement. I'm hitting the ground hard, let's test your ultimate defense. Bring it, shrimp. Shukaku cackled madly. Sand suddenly started coming out of the back of his cloak, from the back of his waist. It stretched across his entire frame, and coated his whole body in a protective layer. Shikaku immediately went about hardening it, crushing pieces together under such pressure it would kill anything that was in between. Naruto let him focus while he focused on the camp. He could see the big house from here, and he needed to start his descent. "Here we go!" he roared, before Kurama's chakra bolstered his own, and Naruto sent a questioning emotion to Kurama, who laughed. "Can't have you dying yet, kid, I still haven't spilt any golden blood." Naruto chuckled at his lifelong partner, and grinned, "Got it." He poured on his adrenaline, and started carrying the sun to the ground, or the lake near the cabins. On the plus side, this is definitely a first for anyone. You are the first creature alive to save the sun from a crash landing. Komei said cheekily, and the Bijuu snorted at her humor, while Naruto only smiled around gritted teeth as he focused on his task. He started pumping more chakra into his strides, and while it hurt like a bitch, he was slowing down, and descending. He approached the camp and adjusted his course, before coming in hot, literally, for the lake. A couple was currently making out on a small raft, and Naruto felt a pang in his soul. "I am so sorry" moment was all he could dedicate to this missed moment for the couple below. "Remember when I said I had the worst luck imaginable? I take it back, I hand the title to that guy right there. I can't help but agree with you." Naruto came in fast, and heavy. "You too. Move or die." That definitely got their attention, and the girl tackled the boy into the water, pulling him under and dragging him to the shore. Naruto tried to avoid them, but he was carrying a flaming bus, not exactly the most precise object to make a clean landing with. Naruto gave a roar of defiance, and touched down on the lake, skidding across its surface as Isabu pumped chakra and helped control, Kukyo and Komei backing him up with control and fortification. Madatabi cheered him on while Son Goku went on about how manly he was right then. Seiken was trying to keep Shikaku from removing the sand armor at the sight of the water, and Jiyuki was watching this whole thing go on, wishing he could use a camera. Naruto eventually realized he wasn't going to make it, and roared up at the bus. "Jackson!" He would have to thank the guy later. On call, a wave/wall of water rose from the other side, and started saturating the ground around them to prevent fires. Naruto then abandoned the previous plan, and slid to the back of the bus, before sinking underwater for more traction, and pulled. The bus lurched, and eventually stopped, pulling to a halt near the banks of the lake. The whole thing was steaming, and Naruto himself had lost his clothes in the event. He was quick to duck underwater and cover himself, cursing the time it took for his cloak to manifest. He just hoped that couple from before wasn't watching. Eventually, the campers came out with towels and dryers, and even spare clothes. Naruto was sure to use his newly appeared cloak to cover himself adequately, before snatching a pair of pants and quickly putting it on. Everyone watched him do so, wondering why the hell he was, and where the hell his pants went. "Naruto, why were you hanging onto the sun nude?" Naruto glared. "I was carrying the damned thing. You try holding the sun and not have your clothes burn off from the heat. I don't practice magic, and my immunity only pertains to me, not my clothing." He almost snarled, though his embarrassment was visible as near all eyes were on him. Kirin and the campers bugged out at his statement. Naruto just snorted and walked over to the bus, before wading in, much to the dismay of the campers, and started helping the hunters out the back. He did it quickly so nobody noticed, their eyes on the other campers that survived the wreck. Grover was making quiet the scene with Apollo, and Thalia looked a little pale, but much better than before. Naruto grabbed two girls at a time, ignoring their disgusted and affronted looks, and channeled chakra through them so he could drag them across the surface. Of course they forgot they were being dragged by a male. They realized they were walking on water, and this energy, it felt amazing. If they asked if he was a son of Poseidon too, he might scream. After quickly evacuating the hunters, he turned to them all and then several plumes of smoke covered them from view. There were a few startled cries, and several clones were now surrounding them, before each lightly touched them, and his Madatabi's fire nature traveled through them, evaporating all the water off them, though it left them with some interesting hairstyles. Naruto was sure to not point that out, didn't need to make them hate him more, and it was funny. Kami, he really did have a death wish, didn't he? That's what I have been saying. But no, it's always, quiet Kurama, not now Kurama, Kurama mocked, grinning at Naruto. Naruto replied with a mental smirk, and left it at that. You guys play capture the flag with the campers, how do you not kill them? It is very trying and requires a massive strength of will. We hunters pride ourselves in our mental strengths and capabilities. Zoe said strictly. Naruto sat cross-legged in front of the group, sitting in the dirt while the hunters stared down at him, mixed between killing him and ignoring him. So, Artemis really likes you guys strong, huh? Can I ask, what are you fighting for? Naruto asked curiously. They looked at him like he was an idiot, Zoe answering for them, for Lady Artemis, she is our goddess, our patron, how could we not? Naruto frowned, nothing personal. More frowned at him, before shaking their heads. Phoebe seemed the most insulted, and spat out a retort, my lady is all that matters. Naruto seemed to stare at all of them, despite actually looking into the sky, it was an unsettling feeling. So you fight to protect her? Nothing ambitious, just to defend what you already have. Naruto sighed, before standing, turning and walking away. Good for you, when fighting to protect, that is when you attain true strength. They looked on as he disappeared into the camp, before turning back and heading for their cabin. Capture would be starting soon, no need to fall behind. One of the hunters froze for a moment, do you think Naruto will fight with the campers? That was a dangerous thought. All the hunters looked at each other briefly, that boy had fought toe-to-toe with their patron, a feat most gods aren't able to do, and that was without any of his abilities. They wondered how they would combat such a foe, but decided that they wouldn't need to worry. The battle was moved to the next morning. Nobody really thought of the battle as they were too busy trying to help Apollo drag the sun out of the lake, and repair the damages done to the docks. Naruto wandered through the camp, his mind wandering as he went. He knew he shouldn't get attached, as he would be taking the first chance he got to return to his home world. He might not like some of those people, but he had friends there, family. Fighting to protect, Ehaku. Naruto muttered as he walked through the camp, heading for Peleus. He hoped Peleus was okay, and would let him spend the night there. It was his duty to guard the fleece, but Naruto always made a point of visiting him and even joining him in his duty when he just wanted to relax. His thoughts drifted to Nico, and he felt his anger spike. He clenched his fists together and grit his teeth. They don't get it, do they, the suffering they'll make Nico endure, assholes. Yes, kitten, they don't care. To them, men are monsters. Who cares about hurting monsters? Naruto just seethed internally, while keeping a flawless impassive gaze on the outside. Fuck them, Nico deserves better. Kit, I know you, but you can't dash. If you say I can't look after him, I swear. Naruto thought dangerously, and Kurama sighed. You know what they have been through, you can't expect them to understand. That makes it worse. They refuse to understand. They tear apart the hearts of anyone that they don't like, regardless. I will never forgive that. To make someone have to bear the pain of being alone, condemning others for making them feel the same, that is hypocritical in its truest form, it's unforgivable. He wandered at a leisurely pace, not really paying attention to his surroundings, when a cluster of girls ran into him when they were turning the corner. Naruto immediately caught the few that collided with him, and immediately set them back straight, before giving a swift apology and continued his walk. The girls looked flabbergasted and the campers all around rolled their eyes. The Aphrodite campers really didn't give up, this was around their 11th attempt, and they had yet to even be noticed. Little did they know, not just the campers were watching, and an age-old rivalry only had more fuel added to the fire. Dinner was always a pretty loud event, and Naruto usually didn't attend. He preferred to simply take his plate and leave. People had tried to tell him it was rude, but he shrugged it off. It's his blessings and thanks, he should give them to who he wants to. But not tonight. Naruto had a mission, and as much as it bothered him, He needed to complete it, even if he really didn't want to. Naruto, despite popular protest, elected to sit on the floor, resting his back against a pillar on the outskirts. He received multiple invitations to join cabin tables. The children of Aphrodite were very persistent, but refused. He couldn't afford to get attached. His goal was to leave this place. He didn't belong here, not in this world, or amongst its people. He always stayed aware of the Artemis table, watching over it and occasionally sending bursts of ki at approaching people. He spared the little girls, but he gave the boys a small to large amount depending on their age. They were the ones at risk. Better learn to fear them now before you become permanently damaged. He hadn't actually had to stop any actual confrontations, but seeing as the Aphrodite cabin stood up unanimously all of a sudden, he knew it was better to stand in the way than at the sidelines. He groaned in annoyance, before standing up and walking towards them in tandem with the Aphrodite cabin. Just as they clashed, Naruto was standing right in front of the hunters, staring at them with his crystal chips of blue. "Oh hey, is there something you needed?" he asked, projecting his aura to tell them that he knew exactly what they were doing, and was giving them an out. The girls seemed to blush at this, some looked at him with mixed looks he didn't even want to decipher, and the guys were only looking at the hunters, one thing in their eyes. Disrespect. This wasn't going to be pretty. One of the boys tried to shove past Naruto, but Naruto only smiled and stuck his chakra to him, so when he shoulder slammed in, it stayed in place as Naruto smiled at him kindly, but everyone knew it was fake. "A little impatient, are we? Last time I checked the bathroom was the other way," Naruto said, flaring his ki to try and give the guy one last chance. "Nope. Where the hell is this rivalry coming from?" The boy seethed and wrenched free when Naruto released him, and just as he walked by, Naruto sighed, before the boy suddenly fell unconscious, collapsing to the floor with hardly a sound or movement, just a small grunt, and bam, instant KO. Nobody saw Naruto even move. "I'm sorry, but Artemis has given me a mission until she returns, and you know my policy, don't you?" he said with a sweet voice, but all the campers only stared in horror at the kid behind Naruto, who wasn't moving. Naruto snorted, before turning to the hunters and shrugging. With a strange look of glee and sadistic pleasure, two girls got a countdown, and soccer ball kicked the boy in the ribs and groin. He slid across the floor and stopped a few feet in front of the girls. He was unaware, so I will pardon him this once. I would hate to kill any of you, so please don't approach the hunters for the duration of their stay. I'd go into a dangerous sounding speech of the hell you'd face if you failed, but well, I don't think I need to write. A strong blast of ki. Unanimous nods. Big Naruto smile, thanks. Before all the enthusiasm soon left his body as he took a step to the side, wandering back to the pillar and sliding down it. He took a few breaths, before closing his eyes and shaking his mental self. "Shukaku? Can you retract the sand armor? I appreciate it, but it's not needed right now, thanks a bunch." Shukaku grumbled about being unappreciated, and Naruto smothered his doubts with a promise to play tonight in his gate. All complaints ceased. Naruto let his legs splay out as he stared at the dimming sky, before resolving himself. He needed to, he couldn't put it off anymore, he just had to. Read them. Naruto sighed, before turning to his back satchel and opening it. He withdrew his hands, and several pink letters with heart stamps were neatly stacked in his hand. The Artemis table widened their eyes in horror and watched as Naruto emotionlessly opened each, read through each one, and then Komu steadied them with his hand. The Aphrodite cabin wasn't sure how to feel about this. He was reading them. But at the same time, destroying them afterwards, what does that mean? Probably rejected, but he read through them. That means he cared, right? Well, no. Naruto sighed as he read the last letter. His opinion of the Aphrodite cabin wasn't high to begin with, so he shouldn't be surprised with what he read. Promises of the best night of his life, great sex, and his personal favorite, we are much better than anything else you will find. He got the whole, my mother is a goddess of love, but they weren't really being loving, they were being, well, unlovable. He sighed heavily, before he saw the hunters getting up and moving out of the pavilion. Awesome. Naruto stood up, before stretching a little and heading out. He was going to follow them, yes, but at a safe distance, he liked being intact. And so, he followed them, to the camp border. Really? They are restless. I recall multiple escapades of yours that were doomed to fail for your Uchiha. I admit defeat. The hunters were moving fast and silently, and just as they were about cross, Naruto appeared in a small cloud of dust from appearing there rapidly. You guys heading out? You weren't thinking of ditching me, were you? He asked innocently, though by his tone an answer wasn't necessary. Yes, we were. Now move aside, boy. A girl stepped forward. She was definitely the largest and most muscled, with a red undershirt showing itself. Phoebe was still pretty aggressive. Naruto snapped his fingers at her and smiled. While I like your honesty, I can't let you go, without me. Huh. Naruto grinned. If I remember correctly, Artemis's words to me were, protect the hunt. She didn't say that you had to remain in the camp for me to protect you. They looked at him in confusion, Zoe taking control of the confusion. As unfavorable as it is to travel with a boy, you're not bad. Naruto grinned. Well, might I make a suggestion? They looked annoyed, but nodded. Naruto smiled sadly. Our best bet would be to leave after the capture the flag game. They looked appalled at the option, and Naruto only sighed. Let me explain. You have a running tradition, and an undisturbed winning streak, right? It is unlikely that you would leave without the goddess before an event, and nothing is wrong. Camp will send people after you, and I for one don't want to travel with any of them. Mediating your two groups sounds like a horrendous undertaking. But that's not important. If we wait till after the games, you can leave in relative peace, and claim that now you have finished the games, you must leave for her. If push comes to shove, and in emergency cases only, I can transform into her myself, and force them to let us go. They clearly looked unhappy with the idea that he would impersonate their goddess, a male, but it was for emergency purposes. And what's to stop us from leaving right now? Phoebe challenged. Naruto only grinned at her, and then his aura grew, predatory. You cannot defeat me, so you would have to resolve to sneak past, and even if you somehow managed, well, let's just say hunting the hunt sounds quite fun, a world's first for sure. Naruto grinned dangerously. The hunters looked at him in disbelief that he could fend them all off successfully, and Naruto felt a light bulb go off. How about this? A duel, all of you versus little ol' me. If I win, you will wait for me. If I lose, I will go with you right now, but either way, I will go with you. That is non-negotiable. They seemed disappointed by that, and Naruto sighed apologetically. I gave my word, sorry. They seemed to think for a moment, before Zoe smiled. Capture the flag. Naruto tilted his head to the side. The hunters turned to her with realization, and then smirked at Naruto. All of us versus you, right? We will borrow the field for the night. First to either incapacitate the enemy team, or take the flag all the way to your own, wins. And if I have taken your flag when you have taken mine. First to reclaim both wins. Naruto stared at her for a moment, before nodding. I thought you guys would have made me survive until morning or something like that. You weren't being merciful, were you? It won't go well if you did. Zoe smirked. That would be unfair. Naruto snorted. Yeah, for you. They glowered at the insult. You don't believe the entire hunt could subdue you? Naruto grinned. Yes, nobody has ever caught me when I truly wished to flee. They smirked. Very well, how about this, a small tournament? A game of capture the flag, hunt, and a duel since you suggested it. Naruto grinned. All right, I like it. Which is first? They grinned. Capture the flag, then the duel, and then you run and hide. Should the sun rise before we capture you, you win. Okay. Define capture. Bound with rope. All right. As it just so happens, the flags are already in place. Shall we begin? They nodded, but before turning away, Naruto stopped them. Oh, and just so you know, if any of you tries to escape, I will personally restrain you and detain you until your goddess enters camp. I don't care how long. My storage place can sustain life for a little over a year, so I am prepared. He said with a knowing look. A few of the girls flinched and twitched at being caught, and dashed off. Naruto grinned, before sending out a clone to act as a starter. He just couldn't stop grinning. This is gonna be fun. He roared out, unaware that this match was already drawing spectators as the hunters advertised the beatdown of Naruto. Chapter 9, Massacre. Naruto was standing at the creek, staring at all the hunters on the opposite bank. They outnumbered him over 20-1, but it didn't matter to him, he was so pumped. He stared at each of them, a grin on his face as they glared at him. This was going to be so fun. Naruto's clone stood in the center of the river, before pointing to both teams. Boss, hunters, retreat to your flags and wait for the signal, you will know it when you see it, hee. The hunters looked wary, but nodded in affirmation and walked off, shooting off a few glares and predatory looks. He could tell that some of them didn't even care if they lost this round, they were excited for the third game. The chance to run him down and catch him. Naruto grinned as he leapt into the trees and raced to his starting point, he would not fall behind. He landed with a quiet thud, before spinning around and facing the other direction, staring into the sky for the signal. He had a pretty good idea of what it was, he could hear the screeching from here. With a loud shout, a small glowing screaming shuriken flew into the air, and on an unseen command, it exploded in a massive bang with a bright light show of blues and whites. Naruto grinned at the display, before folding his hands into a familiar cross. Taijutsu Yokage Bunshin no Jutsu. With several puffs of smoke later, Naruto grinned at all of them, and they all grinned back. Naruto slammed the palms of his hands on the ground, and the earth rumbled. Begin defense plan, home turf. The clones were shocked, but grinned in a terrifying display of eagerness, and disappeared in a blur of speed. Naruto watched them all go with his trained eyes and turned back to the flag, before his face fell slightly. I miss you guys, Gamakaki, Gamatatsu, Gamabuntat, I wish I could bring you here with me. You guys could have just sat around the flag, and the girls would be able to do shit. It would be so funny. He said with a faint smile, before clapping his hands together, and then sitting cross-legged on the ground, eyes closed as he lowered his senses. He could already hear the startled explosions, cries of panic, and roars of outrage. Naruto was giggling at them as he reviewed some of their memories. Defense plan, home turf was actually two separate plans depending on the situation. It was more like a format of how to act, not a set plan. If it was a life or death situation, the clones would be bombs, not pranksters, and he would go on offensive instead of defensive. Right now, some of his clones had used the henge to turn into the actual flag of the enemy team, and had a clone of me running around as they tried to grab him. After being cornered, he would hide, dispel, and another pair would become me and the flag. Other clones ran interference, and some would henge into animals, trees, rocks, anything within the river, and even a few nature spirits. That was a shocker for some of the creatures, but Naruto made sure to explain he wasn't actually one of them, it was just an ability of his to transform. They seemed disappointed at that, but he really wasn't sure why. After almost half an hour, Naruto's clones began to run out. He debated sending more to keep the charade going, but decided that it would be better to simply let it go. He wondered if maybe he should let them take his flag as an apology, but decided against it. He wasn't going to build a relationship of giving them what they want. Never again was he going to be a mindless puppet fool. Naruto rose to his feet, dusting off his pant legs as he stretched slightly. Just as he was about to touch his toes, a silver arrow came slicing through the trees, and Naruto seemingly unaware stretched in a way he dodged it. He smiled faintly as he could hear the growling from the hunters, and how the ones that were there started shooting more arrows at him, while one of the others were hissing that he would notice. Naruto walked to his flag and pulled on the cloth, stretching it out so he could look at the logo he was given. It wasn't a symbol of the camp as he wasn't a demigod, it was actually a circle, with the kanji for 1 through 9 written on the inside edge, and in the center, was his Reaper death seal. Naruto was surprised that the flag had that, and wondered who made them. He would certainly need to question them on how they knew, and who else knew. Naruto whirled around and caught an arrow that would have severed his spine, and glanced around to see all the hunters were surrounding him, glaring at him. They probably realized that the flag I had was fake. I didn't know you could change into objects instead of people. Zoe said with grudging admiration. Naruto grinned, well, my clones can, but I can't transform into anything smaller than me. They aren't flesh and bone like I am. They seemed interested by that fact, but stayed their questions as they all glared down at me. The girl in red seemed to be even angrier than her compatriots. Actually, he remembered, oh. Naruto walked forward to the girl, and bowed his head. I am sorry for my clone. He tried to catch you, not take advantage of you. He saw you lose your balance from the sudden appearance of another clone and tried to absorb the damage from your fall. He didn't think you would actually manage to recover yourself in such a short time. Very impressive, by the way, regaining your bearings like that after a shock and loss of balance. Artemis trains her hunters well. She still seemed pissed, but the compliment seemed to abate her anger somewhat. Maybe she wouldn't go for groin shots now, hopefully. Naruto turned back to the flag, and saw two girls were silently sneaking up. They stared at each other awkwardly, before rushing for the flag. Just as they made contact, the area exploded with smoke, and the girls we sent tumbling back, with a clone holding the flag with a stupid grin, before several other clones appeared from the undergrowth, each with the use of the henge turning into the flag, and took off. The girls cried in dismay and Naruto smiled at them. You never said anything about taking our own flag, all that was said was I needed to have both flags in my base, I'll just bring it back when I have yours. He said with an evil grin, before walking off in their flag's direction. The hunters wordlessly split onto two groups, one pursuing the clones and taking them out to try and find the real flag, while the other half raced ahead of the blonde otherworlder, waiting to confront him on their turf. Naruto smirked, you really shouldn't split up when someone like me can transform. Naruto strolled through the woods, his smile in place. This was great. This world was completely unaware of who he was, or what he could do. He was pretty sure now why shinobi always preferred to keep their own secrets, to be underestimated. It's a wonderful feeling. When someone is hunting you, and they have no idea they are hunting their own predator, it's ecstatic. It was a pleasant walk, he never felt fear, he knew he couldn't lose now, especially since home turf didn't just apply to his territory. It applied to the entire battlefield. A dozen silver arrows suddenly shot out, they were blunted, smart girls. They knew that actually arrows will bounce off, so they increased the weight in hopes of inflicting blunt force damage, instead of trying to pierce. Naruto caught the first arrows, and in an impressive display of speed, he used it as a makeshift baton. He swatted away a few more arrows, before to his chagrin, his arrow broke. The last two collided with his chest, knocking him back a few paces, before falling off, and Naruto standing back up with a brief stretch. Did that break my rib? And bruise your lung? You're lucky I'm here, kid, otherwise you'd be coughing up blood. Naruto grinned and swiped away a small bit of saliva and grinned at the trees, and the hunters shivered as his eyes pierced their cover and felt his gaze. A few immediately booked it, while a few of the braver ones stuck in the area, moving about to try and escape the unsettling feeling. Naruto watched them run about. They were fast, he would give them that, high chunin to low jonin speed, but he was beyond cage level with just Kurama. But now, he had no idea how strong he could be that he was working with the other Bijuu. What would it take to kill him at this point? More arrows rained down as he walked, snatching a few out of the air and using them as batons, only for them to break and be replaced. He could see their astonished expressions, and noticed they were gradually increasing the force and speed of the arrows. They're testing me, trying to determine how much I can take without taking too much damage. Why? Don't they want to kill me? Interesting. Naruto just kept walking, before blurring out of sight in a burst of speed. The hunters immediately fled back to the flag, as that was where Naruto would have to show up. The defenders immediately formed a defensive ring around their flag, and waited for movement. A tense silence ensued, before a second group of hunters appeared, and reinforced their defenses. Zoe immediately looked over to see Phoebe leading them, and nodded at her, before looking back out for Naruto. The entire group stayed there in tense silence, before Zoe started speaking quietly. His flag, where is it? Phoebe grimaced, heavily defended. There was over 10 clones covering it, and I don't know how many more he had hidden away. It being a trap, we rushed back here as it was a play to stall for time. What's happening here? Zoe growled, the armor arrows have the most effect on him, so switch out. He was walking though us. Phoebe growled, that's a boss move alright. They stared into the darkness, before Naruto appeared, waving at them jovially, hey. Mind moving a bit? You're kinda blocking the flag. Zoe glared at him, and the hunters all turned to him fire, when there was an outraged cry. Zoe turned to see the hunters restraining each other, and when she felt her danger sense tingling, she turned and looked in horror as Phoebe grinned at her, and slammed her into the ground. Zoe felt the air leave her lungs and Phoebe capitalized on it. She quickly restrained her and Naruto only stared as this took place. Phoebe looked up at Naruto, alright boss. Flag is ours. And then the entire second force of hunters turned into clones. Zoe gasped in horror as she realized the predicament she was in, and growled at Naruto. Naruto only sighed and grabbed the flag, and then started walking away. I know you know of my abilities, why split up? I told you I once created 10,000 clones, each with their own identities and personalities, did you think I wouldn't capitalize on this? You're dealing with a cloning shapeshifter who knows all of you, what did you think was going to happen? Zoe just growled more on the ground, and the clone holding her side, just wait a few minutes and it will be over. That wasn't the right thing to say apparently. Zoe snarled and a hidden blade popped out, stabbing the clone and it dispelled. The other clones tried to restrain her, but in the moment of confusion, the other hunters gained freedom, and helped the others. Naruto watched as his prisoners escaped with their flags, taking note of their style and weaponry as they did. Zoe stood and glared at Naruto, who hadn't moved. I agree it was foolish to trust the new group, but we have you now. Naruto saw all the hunters ready their bows, and he sighed even more, do you really think those were my only clones? Zoe immediately tensed and jumped high in the air. And good timing too. 50 clones appeared from the rubble, trees, branches, grounds, everywhere. Instead of taking prisoners, they simply knocked the hunters in reach out, before catching them and laying them down softly around the flag. Naruto watched, leaning on the flag. Zoe landed and immediately blurred into speed, evading still appearing clones and glaring at Naruto, who laughed. Did you think I was only going to hide clones on my side? Why the hell would I limit myself? This is a battlefield, I'm not going to waste chances. Zoe growled further and then pulled out a pair of silvery hunting knives. She blitzed around at even faster speeds, and carved away at the clones that attacked her and her comrades. Naruto watched with slight admiration as she made light work of them, and within the minute, they were all dispatched, and she was standing by the flag, breathing hard. Where is Phoebe? Naruto snorted, still playing with my clones. She has cut down the number by a good margin, but she still has a ways to go. Zoe panted, before readying her knives and setting herself into a defensive stance, ready to defend her sisters. Naruto smiled at that, and twirled the flag around in his fingers like a bow staff. Well, I'll be going now, thanks for the fun. Naruto turned and walked away, humming a tune she didn't recognize, and went to check on her sisters who were starting to wake up. She grimaced as she realized she was outsmarted, and vowed that once her sisters were up and ready, they would seek revenge. Naruto walked calmly through the trees as spun his new flag, wandering towards his side. Naruto, why didn't you send the rest of the clones? There are several more clones throughout her side of the battlefield, why only use that section? Madatabi said curiously. It was a test of her abilities, and I knew she wanted to take care of her sisters. I wasn't going to let her pass out knowing she couldn't care for them, that is cruel. This is a game after all, not a war. I'm surprised you haven't killed anyone yet, I commend your strength of will. Isabu said, and Naruto grinned, coming from you, that's huge, thanks. Naruto walked to the river separating their sides, and as he jumped across, he felt a wire trip and he heard the air whistle as a trap sprung. Naruto immediately used his air walking abilities to shoot into the air above, and watched as the whole riverbank was suddenly covered in spikes and arrows were sunk into the sand. He landed and saw Phoebe's force appear with his flag in their hands. Naruto felt a smile tug on his lips, but he replaced it with a grin. So, you got it huh? Phoebe grinned victoriously, you can't escape us, we are the hunter of Artemis. Naruto only grinned at her dangerously. Well, I guess I'm pretty special then. The flag in Phoebe's hands all of a sudden poofed into smoke, and re-emerged as rope, which snaked around her and bound her limbs together, and she fell to the ground in dismay and shock. The hunters were just as speechless as she was. A clone of Naruto appeared behind Naruto and gave him his flag, and Naruto grinned. "Well, I'll be going now," was his cheeky statement, before running down the river back, and then crossing the river with few ripples as he slid across the surface, and ran. The hunters gave chase, and a few stayed behind to free an enraged Phoebe. Naruto laughed as he went on, the chase bringing back memories of his pranks, the Umbu that chased him across the village and back. They only caught him a few times, and each one was a chase to remember. Naruto snaked in between trees and doubled back to shoot through their ranks at high speeds to taunt them. He wanted to see them at their best, and they weren't taking him seriously still. "Come on. Show me your best. You won't catch me without it," Naruto shouted gleefully, before charging towards his base. Just as he was about to make contact, an arrow exploded into rope, and it bound his legs. He tumbled and slid into the clearing his base was in, and laughed before looking at the angry hunters behind him. "Nice shot," was all he said, before he grunted and snapped the bindings. The hunters took advantage of his predicament and dogpiled him, restraining him and holding him down. Naruto laughed at them and wrestled playfully, trying to get them off without hurting them. They seemed to notice as this and pressed their advantage. Eventually, he stopped moving, and Naruto grinned at them. "Well, you got me, what now?" he said with a large smile. It was infectious. The girls tried to fight it off with their scowls. "Don't move." Naruto sighed and let his head fall back, thudding against the earth. "Okay, but the flags are under me, so if you want to win, I am going to move, so what's next?" They glanced at each other, before nodding. One hunter stepped back, and pulled out a particularly heavy arrow, and aimed it. "Oh no." Naruto paled as hunters grabbed his legs and forced them apart. "You move, and you suffer." Naruto nodded frantically, and they smirked. All boys were the same. A hunter reached under Naruto, and groped around for the flags. They weren't there. They snarled and one of them punched him, only to gasp as he puffed out into smoke. They heard laughing ricochet throughout the clearing, and another Naruto stood at the edge of the clearing, both flags on his lap as he stared at their shocked expressions. "When I doubled back, I swapped places with a clone." "You have been playing with a clone ever since then?" They looked at him in shock, and only watched as he walked to his base and planted both flags in his base. "Well, looks like I win," he said with a megawatt smile, and the girls didn't even blink. This hadn't happened before. This wasn't supposed to happen. How did this happen? The hunters all stood up, and groaned and glared at him. Naruto only laughed. "Aw, come on, don't be mad, it was a good game. You ready for the duel?" They didn't seem to be ready for that. Naruto laughed and walked forward, all of them on guard, but didn't back away. Naruto and a few clones walked out and started healing their abrasions and bruises. Zoe and her group are okay, just a few knocked out, but they're fine. They should be coming though the clearing in a few seconds actually. On the dot, Zoe and her hunters appeared in a flash, and kicked Naruto away. He skidded across the earth and pouted at them. "For real? I was just healing them, geez." Zoe looked shocked at that, and then looked in astonishment as he had both flags in his base. She ground her teeth, but sighed in recognition. "Well done, you have bested us this time, but never again." Naruto grinned at her cheekily. "Oh, I don't know about that." The clones came forward again and tended to all their wounds. A few popped this weird food in their mouths, and they instantly looked better, wounds healing on their own. "What was that?" Naruto asked in astonishment. "They were like soldier pills. Ambrosia, food of the gods. It has healing and restorative properties, but as we aren't fully gods, we can't have more than 2 squares, it would kill us when we burned up." Naruto was amazed at that, but also doubtful, and asked if he could see a square. They were hesitant, but nodded. Naruto inspected the square, and frowned. What would happen if a mortal tried it? "They would combust," was the unanimous reply. Naruto snorted. "PTFF, food of the gods. He stood up to his full height and beamed at all the girls. Ramen is the food of the gods. Not this stuff. I refuse to accept it. He said childishly, and the girls looked at him like he was an idiot. A few cracked a smile, but it instantly disappeared as they realized what they were doing. Ambrosia is their food. And nectar is the drink of the gods. Phoebe claimed with annoyance, and Naruto physically withered, before turning away and shaking his head savagely. No. Ramen is the true way. Broth is the drink of the gods. Not that. I refuse. He said, before turning them to with mock looks of pity, poor hunters, you have fallen astray from the true way, you will be missed. He said forlornly, before wiping away fake tears. The hunters were speechless. What even is ramen? Zoe muttered in confusion, and Naruto tensed. The other hunters seemed to realize the danger, and backed away comically, leaving Zoe there alone in her confusion. Naruto turned to her with comical eyes. You've never heard of ramen? He asked quietly, and Zoe was actually nervous. No hey. Naruto scooped her up bridal style and charged towards the pavilion. I surrender the duel. Something more important has come up. He said and carried away a wailing hunter, while the others stared at their retreating form. What the hell? Does that mean we win? The hunters nodded dumbly, before turning to her sisters with an evil grin. That leaves the hunt left. Grins all around. Chapter 10, Hope. Naruto was in the pavilion, with a tied-up Zoe secured to a bar stool glaring at him. What is the meaning of this? She would shout, and Naruto would only look at her with a crazy grin. You don't know, so you must learn. Then, with a less than sane cackle, he would return to his cooking pot, giggling every now and then. Zoe was starting to seriously contemplate her safety with every little shiver that came over his shoulders at his smothered laughter. She tried escaping, but the more she tried, the tighter the bindings got. She tried cutting, burning, and breaking the rope, but it remained undamaged. She idly wondered what cursed materials were introduced during its creation, but resolved herself to the fate she would soon discover. He would not harm her under the pledge to her patron, she would survive this. After a few minutes, Naruto turned to her with a massive grin and stars in his eyes. In his hands, was a bowl. Naruto set it down in front of her, and she was immediately hit with a strong smell of seasons and flavor. She didn't deny that it smelled good, but not to her particular liking. Naruto plopped down in front of her on the other side of the counter, and gave her a pair of chopsticks. She looked at him quizzically, and he only grinned. Behold Zoe, the true food of the gods. Naruto said with a dramatic wave of his hands and snap of chopsticks. She didn't look convinced. Naruto hurried over and undid the bonds on her hands. She tried to get free, but Naruto immediately stopped her efforts. Do not resist, you will appreciate my efforts after this, you will be awakened to the one true way. Naruto said strongly, his eyes no longer holding rationality. She looked past him and saw to her horror, the rest of the hunters. They were simply just watching, some were even looking at the bot in curiosity to see if there was more to go around. Help me. Zoe hissed, and Phoebe only shook her head sadly. It's okay, you will understand, it's the true way. Zoe turned to Naruto, snarling in partial anger and panic. Stop with the clones. Naruto smirked and prodded her forehead, which only increased her anger. I am not eating that. Naruto looked like he had been physically stabbed, and even staggered back a few paces. Zoe sprung free from his weakened grasp and hissed at him. Naruto actually fell to the ground and started tracing circles with his finger. But it's divine. He said childishly with a pout, continuing his circling. Zoe was agape at this display, before looking back at the bowl suspiciously and then back to the blonde. Is it poisoned? Naruto snapped to his feet, looking genuinely insulted, as if I would defile the food of the gods. Zoe honestly wasn't sure how to think about the male in front of her. He was strong, godly strong, and yet he never loomed over anyone, only carried them higher. Even in their battle, his clones never did any real harm to them. He never touched them perversely when he had the chance, and even respected them enough to not hold back unrealistically. She slumped a little. Something she didn't do. She sighed, very well, I will try this concoction, but in exchange Naruto appeared in front of her with stars in his eyes, grabbing her hand and shaking it. Thank you, thank you. You won't regret it. I surrendered the duel just so you could try it. She was shocked at that. He threw away a win for her to simply try this. She doubted it was hidden cowardice. What is ramen? She walked to the stool and sat down, before lifting the chopsticks and stabbing them into the broth. She picked up a few noodles and smelled them, looking for any source of toxins or poisons. Nope, only salty goodness. She sighed, and with a prodding look from Naruto, she put it in her mouth. Flavor, a lot it. It was like a whole feast of meaty flavors with salt and seasonings in a bite. She stabbed for more and drank the broth, appreciative of the dish. Naruto watched with a smile, but felt his mood darken slightly as he remembered the true food of the gods, Ayame and Teiuchi's ramen. Kami, he wanted a bowl, or 30. Zoe finished her bowl in around 10 minutes, placing her chopsticks on the bowl and dabbing the corners of her mouth. I must confess, this dish wasn't bad, but it still falls below ambrosia by a margin. She said, but when she looked at him, she was shocked to find him in his own little world. With a tear running down his cheek. Naruto! She called, and he snapped to his senses. He seemed to realize his situation and smiled at her brightly, a look ruined by his tear. He realized this a second later, and brushed it away with a sad smile. Zoe, I have a confession to make. This is my attempt at the food of the gods. It isn't really it. The real stuff comes from my home world, made by a father and daughter duo, my favorite people in my entire life. I'm sorry to say, that I will never be able to replicate their dishes, but I can say something with certainty. He regained his grin and pointed at himself victoriously. My ramen is 3 margins worse than theirs. And if it is only 1 margin behind ambrosia, then it is indeed supreme. He struck a victory pose, peace sign, and all. Zoe only stared at him in befuddlement, before shaking her head and walking away. You're weird. Naruto wilted, but sighed, and cleaned up his mess. Yeah. Zoe walked to the rest of the hunters, warmth in her stomach and her mind lost in thought. Ayame and Teiuchi, perhaps from, wait, he said, home world, does that mean he isn't even supposed to exist here? Maybe that isn't why he is like the other males, because he truly isn't one of them. Lieutenant. Phoebe called, and Zoe flinched from her thoughts and looked up at them, determination in her eyes. Girls, we must win. Naruto walked back towards the clearing he left the girls in, noticing it was empty, and he sighed, before calling out. I know you are there. Can you come out so we can start the hunt? If not, I'm just going to wait, which is in my favor anyway, as you have to catch me. He said, before sitting down on a flat space and sighing. A few seconds later, Zoe and Phoebe appeared, rope in their hands. Well boy, ready to surrender. Naruto sighed, and here I thought we moved past that. It's Naruto, that's my name. I'm not boy or male or any other derogatory name. I have a name, use it. They looked at him curiously, before approaching him at fast speeds. Naruto rolled backwards and stood up, jumping back and landing with his back to a tree. We have an omission to make to the laurels. Zoe said, and Naruto frowned. What do you wish to add? Zoe smiled. Should we win, I will lead the quest to save my lady. Naruto blinked, and then looked confused. I thought that was what we were going to do anyway. Was there something I missed? Blink. What? Phoebe asked incredulously, her voice losing its harshness. You were going to let us lead. Naruto frowned. Why wouldn't I? I'm new to this world, I hardly know anything on the grand scheme of things, and any team I led would surely suffer. Zoe, from what I understand, is nearly 2,000 years old. She has infinite more experience than I do on this world, and you trust her. Why wouldn't she lead when she is clearly the best candidate? Zoe shook her head. You said it again, this world, what do you mean? Were you originally not? Naruto's expression darkened. Yes, I am not. I haven't been in this world for more than what you call a year. That was a shocker. Phoebe looked less than believing. Where do you come from then? Hell. Naruto's lips curled into a small, cruel smile. Yeah, something like that. That was chilling. The vocal, cheerful blonde of Sunshine wasn't there anymore. He was colder, darker, full of pain, anger, and loneliness. He literally had a dark aura around him, before it suddenly vanished, and he looked back up at them with his usual smile. Are you sure you want to waste time like this? You have until sunrise, and you're dawdling. Zoe really wasn't sure what to think at this point, so she went with her gut feeling. You're weird. Naruto twitched, and his head cocked to the side. Yeah, you said that earlier. Anyway, was there something else you wanted to add? Phoebe stepped forward. I want the answer to 3 questions, with complete answers and honesty. Naruto frowned. That is a dangerous statement. May I know what the questions are on? You. My abilities. No. That surprised Naruto, looking at her in confusion. What could you possibly want to know? You will find out at the end of the duel. Phoebe said, gripping the rope. Naruto held her gaze for a moment, before sighing. And if I win? I solemnly swear to never shoot you in the nuts. Naruto perked up at that. Tempting, I guess I will see when you ask your questions. Now come at me. The girls huffed at not getting an answer, and charged forward. A few sneaky hunters tried to get behind him, but let out startled cries as the tree Naruto was backed up against was actually several clones standing on each other's shoulders. Naruto grinned and then jumped at his clones, where they all scrambled with each other, hiding the original within their ranks. Eventually, they all formed into 5 rows of 5. Can you find the real one? They all chorused together, and the girls readied their arrows. I wouldn't do that. 3 of us are explosive. Chimmered a clone from the corner, and the hunters instantly hesitated. Greek fire? Asked a hunter. The clone looked confused. I don't know what that is, but if it blows up, sure. You can call it that. He laughed, and the other clones joined him in their chuckles. The hunters were really wigged out by that. They all started walking through the lines, inspecting each clones to see if they could identify the real one. Each Naruto grinned, and another spouted off. If you guess the wrong one, we scramble again. Back to square one. Unless he explodes. At which point, it's game over anyways. They all laughed, before they all stopped suddenly. But seriously, don't blow up, it might kill. The hunter's eyes narrowed, before braving on undeterred. Naruto grinned at that, and waited for them to come to a conclusion. They examined each Naruto, before walking back and frowning. And then they all started running. The clones looked confused at that, but then noticed a weird green jar on the floor. It was really pretty. It glowed faintly, and was really hot. The clones were transfixed by this, and then an arrow came through the pierced the jar. Explosion time. The clones nearest instantly puffed out of existence. The ones farther away were thrown back from the force. The hunters charged back and started picking off suspicious clones, and eventually, they stopped, with 12 clones left. They looked at each of the clones, and one of them grew angry. Oi! That could have killed someone. He was instantly shot, and he puffed into smoke. The hunters cursed, but Phoebe explained. You survived Apollo's touch when in the morning, Greek fire would have barely harmed you. One of the clones grinned, and then he undid his jacket. On the inside, were these weird tags that pulsed in flames brightly. The hunters immediately backed away, their danger senses telling them to flee. The clone grinned. Let me show you what an enemy of mine called art. He exploded in a ground-shaking boom, the light waking all the campers from their bunks and lighting up the skies. When the hunters returned, they saw a massive crater and a bleeding Naruto near the outskirts. The hunters immediately rushed forward, but when they got close, Naruto rolled out of the way and tumbled down the crater side, before coming to a skidding halt and standing up with blood dripping from his face and steam sealing his cuts. The hunters were bewildered by his regeneration, and Naruto cursed mentally. What the hell was that? I wasn't even close. Since when were those tags that strong? It's that fact that there isn't a chakra in this world, Kit. It naturally reacts much stronger than it would normally. It's a miracle I'm here, or you would have been critically injured. Naruto frowned at that. That wasn't expected. If all his seals were that much stronger, maybe that was any his summoning didn't work. He was probably summoning the whole freaking mountain with the chakra he was putting into it. That was a comforting thought. Maybe he really could see them again. And they could take him home. Naruto took in a few shaky breaths before a smile came to his face. He could feel it, hope, it was here with him. He crossed his fingers and beamed at the night sky. Taiju Yokage Bunshin no Jutsu. He bellowed, and the entire crater and surrounding forests were covered in smoke. The hunter's jaws dropped as the smoke cleared, revealing an army. A clone army. Thousands of Naruto clones were crammed together, looking at Naruto with hope before he muttered to them. Go, see if it's true. Don't you dare dispel until you can confirm it. Go, and please be right. They all nodded, before sprinting off at terrifying speeds. Naruto watched them go with a small smile of hope, something all the hunters missed except one. What happened? Zoe called, and Naruto grinned at her. Hope. She stared at him for a moment, before charging him, the rest of the hunters coming after him. Naruto grinned at all of them, his old self burning at him. He could see them, he could hear them. Tsunade Bachin, Gaara, B, Kakashi-sensei, the Toads, Kono, and his little crew, the Hidden Leaf Village. He could hear them. He roared at the sky and charged the hunters, who noticed his change and feel his hope, his desperate hope. They clashed. The sun rose, and the second curfew was up. The campers came running out, inspecting the field. They knew the game between Naruto and the hunters was happening, but the harpies came to eat them, and so they had to leave. But everyone was curious on what caused the Big Bang last night. The camp rushed forward, and was in awe and horror at what they saw. The forest, it was smaller. And a really big hole was the reason. In the center, it looked like a lake used to be there, but now it was completely dried up. Near the bottom ring, a weird wall was up, with a strange power coursing through it, and at the bottom was Naruto. He was out like a light, with several of the hunters surrounding him, either knocked out or sleeping peacefully. Some were beginning to wake up, and all the campers retreated in fear. They would wait till the storm was over before looking at the damage. Zoe was the first to wake up. She was sleeping fairly well, but when she felt the ground beneath her she tensed. This was earth, not her sleeping bag. She sat up quickly, examining her surrounding and checking for weapons. She glanced at her sisters, and saw they were all sleeping on the ground, surrounding a snoring Naruto, who had a rope tied securely around his foot. She blinked as her memories came back and she smiled. They had won, though not really. They had eventually captured a clone, and tied him up. When Naruto appeared, they told him they had won as they had captured him as the clones were technically him. He fought with them, and when they were arguing, he tripped an old trap that was there long before they arrived that night. The hunters were quick to grab him and say they won. He looked incredulous, and eventually they all laughed, which was weird. He was a male, that didn't happen. Eventually, one by one, her sisters had started to pass out. Naruto had tried to carry them, Phoebe protested vehemently, and so, they camped in the center of the crater, thought if she remembered right, Naruto was outside of it. Zoe heard a small choking sound, and she looked over to see Naruto with his eyebrows drawn together and cold sweat in his face. His right hand twitching, a blue energy appearing and disappearing in his palm, responding to his dream self calling to it. She frowned and tried to wake him, but she was soon flying backwards as a foot stretched out and planted itself on her chest with great force, grinding her skin as she slid against the inclining slope. A blue spiraling sphere in his right hand outstretched, his eyes clouded, and then the fog vanished, before dispelling his attack and rushing over to Zoe, who had blood leaking out of her mouth. Damn it! Don't do that! Naruto chastised her in anger and worry as he bit his thumb and drew a circle on her stomach with his blood, before going through some hand signs and placing his hands in a triangle shape over the circle so it was in the open space between his hands. Zoe rasped and coughed a few more times, before her breathing cleared and Naruto's blood smoked and vanished, though a faded red circle was on her stomach like a scar. Zoe glared at him, before letting her head fall, which Naruto caught with a look of dismay and she muttered something out. "I'm sorry." "I am sorry." She shouted at him, before turning her head away. "I shouldn't have done that." Naruto grinned, apologized, or tried to wake me up. She glared at me before coughing and flicked him the throat. "Let go, before the hunters kill you for touching me." "What are you doing?" Naruto flinched and immediately propped Zoe up, before cowering behind her. Phoebe and a few other hunters were up, noticing the noise, and more were on the way. "An accident, don't worry, I'm fine," Zoe said with placating hands, though she didn't know why the hell she was defending him. "There is blood on your mouth." Naruto hastily brought a hand around with a warm white towel that he got from who knows where, and quickly dabbed her mouth clean, before shrinking back. "What blood?" Zoe asked innocently, and Phoebe was speechless. Zoe felt Naruto's healing hands on her back, and pushed herself onto her feet, feeling good as new. "Do not delay, we have a battle with Camp Half-Blood soon, so gear up and prepare," Zoe ordered, before walking off, Naruto being left in the line of fire. He smiled nervously, before slamming both palms on the ground and the weird wall around them lost its power, and then crumbled. He was sent a few questioning looks and Naruto only grumbled. "To protect you from the monsters in this forest while we slept, geez, what did you think I was doing? Keeping you prisoner," he thought angrily, before jumping high in the air and running off. "I hope he isn't participating in the games," a hunter said quietly. She was answered with solemn nods. Phoebe on the other hand watched him go, before turning to them to get ready. "I have my questions, boy, and you will answer them." That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.